Home sales also soared in July as a drop in mortgage rates boosted demand. Sales coming in stronger than expected, climbing 10.6% to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 739,000 units. That's the highest level in more than a year and the sharpest increase in nearly 2 years. And while housing affordability is still improving nationwide, new problems are still popping up now in the Sun Belt, the hot part of the market. Joining me now with an in-depth look at the real estate side of things is Andy Walden, Vice President of Enterprise Research at ICE, Bess Friedman, CEO of real estate firm Brown Harris Stevens, and then David Tinsley, Senior Economist at Bank of America Institute. Thank you to the three of you for being here. Let's start with the kind of macro markets overall with regard to the state of real estate. So I'll turn to you, Bess, for that one. Do we see some kind of real notable building positive momentum in the market because of the rate picture right now?
Hey, good afternoon. Nice to be with everyone. Yeah, I think consumer perception is improving. And I think what Chairman Powell said today has been helpful. He's indicated that if we continue in this direction, that there will most likely be a Fed fund cut in September, which would be good. So I think momentum has been positive. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but it's, rates have come down. They're the lowest they've been in 15 months. And so we're seeing a pickup in volume. Buyers are getting off the sidelines. So yes, right now we're in a pretty decent place and we're feeling very positive coming into the September market.
Andy, this is an interesting discussion in context of where rates were 5 to 6 years ago versus where they are right now. Yes, they're lower than they were at the peak, but there's still folks out there that have more 30-year fixed-rate mortgages with 2 and 3 handles on them by the time we're done. So just how much is this going to trigger some housing activity?
Well, if you look at the last couple of times, Beth just touched on this. This is the first time we've been in this range since kind of the home buying season last year. We got somewhat in this range earlier this year as well. And the last 2 times you've moved into this kind of 6.5% or below range, you have seen demand return to the market. You've seen home prices pick up a little bit. You've seen buyers return. And so I think that's the broad expectation here. And I think it's also worth noting that when you look at those July home sales, those were driven by high 6% rates. The June was driven by low 7% rates. We're now in the sub 6.5% range as well. And so that puts a little bit of boost behind some of these fall numbers.
All right, so the housing dynamic, Dave, I'll turn to you for this. I'd like to know about the movement because there's a case that was made, and it seems logical, that folks had those kind of silver/golden handcuffs with the mortgage rates that they refinanced into a number of years ago. Is there a way in which that does become unfrozen, even if rates aren't as low as they were 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, I think we shouldn't forget the first-time buyer in all this. So, when we look at our data and we track at the Bank of America Institute people moving between cities around the country, that was down 25% in 22, 15% in 23, but now it's pretty much flat. And within that data, it's the younger, lower-income people that are moving. And the Bank of America Home Buyer Insights report suggested like 60% of these movers are happening for affordability reasons. So there's a lot of people, I think, a lot of young, perhaps lower-income households looking for the opportunity to buy. In that same survey, we asked renters where they want to be in 5 years' time. 90% of them say they want to own. So there's a lot of people, first-time buyers, who are on the sidelines. Obviously, they don't have the locking on the rate to restrain them for now.
Bess, the story over the course of the last several years has been around the institutional ownership in real estate and how there's a crowding out effect for some of those first-time home buyers and those people who want to move from renting to owning. I wonder, in your mind and what you've seen in the business, is there a chance that first-time and maybe second-time home buyers have a real shot at getting the house of their dreams in this kind of a market?
Yeah, I think there's always that opportunity. We have to keep in mind that rates are still historically very low. It's just that we have a short memory and people have their brains wrapped around the 2 and 3%, but we're not going to see that for a very long time. So there's plenty of opportunity, not only for first-time home buyers, But people who are, cycle of life, who are moving for new jobs, having families, unfortunately, losing loved ones or going through a divorce, they continue to have to buy and sell because the market is there to serve them, not instruct them. And so, people don't necessarily look at rates and say, oh, I'm not going to get into the market. Sometimes you have to get into the market, and you can always think about refinancing later on and do something a little bit different and lock in a better rate. So I'm somewhat optimistic about where we are.
Now, Bess has got an interesting point here. Andy, if you take a look at the way that mortgages are used, there's a plethora of tools in the toolbox at this point. What does the data suggest to you about the types of movement that we are seeing in certain parts of the mortgage market? Are we back to using ARMs a lot? Are we back to using just fixed rate loans, zero interest mortgages? Are they even available or offered these days? What exactly does the mortgage picture look like from a business standpoint?
Yeah, and you certainly see a variety of different things, right? So late 2022, 2023, it was interest rate buy downs, right? We were going to 3-2-1 buy downs, 2-1 buy downs to reduce your interest rate for a temporary period of time. Like Beth said, for folks that are wanting to marry the home, date the rate, and wait for those interest rates to come down. You've seen some similar behavior among adjustable rate mortgages as well, where folks have jumped in. We're not talking anything similar to what we saw prior to the great financial crisis, but you are seeing folks kind of trying to find creative ways to kind of afford the environment that we're in right now while we wait for interest rates to come down. I think there was an interesting point made about migration as well, and I think that's one way folks are getting around affordability. Not only is the Midwest more affordable than the rest of the country, but it's affordable compared to its own long-run averages too. And when you look at California, that's just simply not the case. And so I think you are seeing folks use migration as one of those tools in their tool belts to get into some of these more affordable markets in the Midwest that have been priced out of some of these more expensive markets.
All right, David, I'm going to go to you for the last word here because I'm holding in my hand your latest research report from B of A Institute, and it's titled On the Move, Hidden Costs and Slowing Spending. That migration is huge. Many of our audience have migrated to certain parts like the Sun Belt, or they know people who have. What exactly is that dynamic like if you go to places like Florida and Texas and anywhere else down south?
Well, what we're highlighting in that report really is that affordability in terms of house prices, go to the south. Obviously, it's deteriorated somewhat in parts of the south, Miami being an obvious example. But there are some hidden costs that I think are, making people cautious. Home insurance is the obvious one. In Texas, Florida, 25% or so property insurance up on the last 5 years. Perhaps some worries about climate change and how that might affect the livability of those areas going forward and the cost on utilities and insurance. So there's a lot to consider in these moves other than just the mortgage rate, I think.
All right, Bess, I lied because I'm going to give you the last word. You're the realtor here. You are the realtor. All real estate is local. Your clients are very much in the New York metro area and Florida as well. Take us through what you think is the dynamic there for those people who thought about moving to Florida or are already there.
Well, look, as we know, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people leave New York City and go to Florida or move to Connecticut, but we've seen a migration back to the city. So it just really depends on what people want, what they need, their circumstances, where they want to be, where their work is. So the challenge we see really in real estate right now is a lack of inventory. We have high demand. We don't have enough inventory in places like Florida, places like Connecticut. New York has a pretty decent amount of inventory right now. And so I think it just depends on what people want. But overall, we have seen the market in the last few months pick up. I think rates, inflation, all those things are very positive, and the economy, has been steady. So I'm pretty bullish on the real estate market as we enter September, October, and November. So I have a positive outlook, I guess.
All right. I think you have to be if you work in real estate right now. All right. Andy Walden at ICE Enterprise Research. Bess Friedman, Brown Harris Stevens, thank you very much for that. And, of course, David Tinsley at B of A Institute as well. Have a nice weekend to each of you guys.